Welcome back. Welcome back. Our next speaker is Tim Maloney from Protiviti. Protiviti is a gold sponsor this year. Tim is an associate director in Protiviti's IT audit and technology consulting practices. Based in Pittsburgh, Tim partners with executives to get the most value for their IT functions. In the last 15 years, Tim has helped organizations across a variety of industries to understand and respond to their IT risks. Tim believes that business problems are best addressed by the solution the organization will implement. That's why his projects focus on providing realistic recommendations that align with his clients' corporate cultures and capabilities. Please welcome Tim as he presents
Digitalization. I can't say it either, so.
What does this mean to IT and internal audit professionals? Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Jennifer. Did everybody hear me okay? I'm going to roam this way because I feel bad for this table back here in the corner that can't see anything. So we'll ask all the questions of you guys, right? So, well, thank you, everybody. And is everyone enjoying the session so far today? Good, good. So we're going to shift a little bit of what you've been hearing so far around information security and talk a little bit about digitalization or digitization. I can't say it either. Or digital transformation. I'm going to use all of those interchangeably, mostly because I have to concentrate to say digitalization. So bear with me if I stumble through it a little bit. But there's 4 things I want to make sure we cover today. I want to make sure we talk a little bit about defining what digitalization actually is. We'll talk about risks, some of which you already know about, and some that will be new as organizations move down this digitalization path. We'll talk about how digitalization can impact internal audit in addition to just IT in general. And we'll leave you with a couple of thoughts as we wrap up on, as you go back after today, as you're back in the office, I'm hoping tomorrow and not later today, that you can take back to your organizations and start asking some questions as you consider how your enterprise is going to go through digitalization. So with that, what is digitalization? Is there anybody here that has a good definition that you sit there and go, this is what digitalization means to me? Anybody at this table that can't see anything? Well, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people, and how we define it is that digitalization is the use of technology and digital advances, and that can be anything from social media to data analytics to artificial intelligence, things like that. But how you're using those advances to radically improve performance or the reach of your enterprise. And I think that's important, right? A lot of times we hear about organizations going through a digitalization effort, and it's much more around automation. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But there are a couple of things that if your organization is considering certain types of technology are indicative that you're going down a digital transformation path. So I'm going to pull them up here. I'm not going to talk about them in great detail, but cloud, everybody's familiar with the cloud. How many companies here are using the cloud in some context now? Right, so the cloud is going to continue to get bigger and bigger within, as organizations continue to transform their IT functions and their services through the use of digital technology. It's so much easier to be able to support an infrastructure that you don't have to support, that you outsource to somebody, and that's going to enable IT and your IT professionals to focus more on how do I implement technology that can really enable my business operations. Mobile, everybody I'm sure here has a phone in your pocket that we've seen as companies move through digital transformation initiatives. They have continually focused on adopting mobile technologies, whether that's making it easier for your employees to submit expenses through an app on their phones, to interacting with your customers in new and different ways because they have an app that they can interact with. Social, everybody uses social, many of you use social. This is probably an area that personally I don't see as much from a digital transformation perspective, but it is providing a lot of new and unique ways for organizations to interact with their companies or their clients, right? To say, I'm always available on Facebook. Somebody can always post a comment on social. Well, how quickly do you respond to that? Are you dependent upon having to have somebody sitting there monitoring your Facebook page or your Twitter account 24/7 to be able to respond to those issues and comments as they come up? Internet of Things. I spoke on this a couple of years ago here at the ISACA conference. Internet of Things is continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. How do I track everything that goes through my warehouse? How do I track everything that goes on within my four walls or even outside of my four walls? Do I have a way of measuring or providing a product to my customers that can give you insight into everything from the temperature of their house, what time do they come home? How do you utilize that information to make better informed business decisions through, last area here, analytics. How many organizations have a data analytics efforts underway or currently doing data analytics to understand things? Right? So this is going to continue to get bigger and bigger with big data. How much information can you pull in and analyze that to some sort of competitive advantage? And we've heard about horror stories about the use of data analytics. A few years ago, Target starting to send a family coupons for baby products as a result of some of their analysis. Well, found out that they didn't know about it yet, and it kind of sparked the whole controversy of it. But analytics is going to continue to be a significant focus area as organizations move through digital transformation. So, from an IT perspective, if you're not thinking about these things, you just need to start considering, what are we doing about this? And if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to provide it, if you're not going to give data analytics to your organization, who are they going to go out to? How are they going to start implementing shadow IT and things like that to be able to get the insights that the business wants to be able to drive that customer innovation? I highlighted this earlier, but keep in mind that digitalization is not the same as automation. And robotic automation, we were commenting earlier out at our booth, we have a white paper on robotic automation. And that's not just putting robotics out and putting the machines out on the shop floor or something like that. That can also be bots, web-facing tools to interact with your clients. But keep in mind that digitalization is about that significant transformation of existing processes. It's about making it completely different. Automation tends to focus on doing your current practices faster, more efficient, but not significantly changing. So keep that in mind, and I want to give an example now. How many here have ever checked into a hotel? Just want to make sure everyone's still awake. So, and how many in the last 5 years? How many people have been to Walt Disney World? Okay, fewer. So a few years ago, hotels started introducing this idea of check-in online before you arrive. I'd argue that's really was an example of automation, not digitalization, because all it lets you do was say, yes, I'm still going to come and stay at your hotel, and yeah, I'm going to pick my room, but I still had to go to the front desk. It wasn't until recently that select chains and select locations started offering the ability to bypass the front desk and open your room key or use your phone as your room key to get into your room. It's not that prevalent, but it didn't transform the process. It didn't transform how you would interact with their front desk operations. Contrast this. Has everyone heard of the magic bands at Walt Disney World? So this, I would argue, is an example of digital transformation. So if you're not familiar, that little band that you see touching a little Mickey head is a magic band. It is your room key. It is a payment option. It is the way you can associate pictures with you. When you've ridden a ride and you saw your picture at the end, you scan your magic band and it knows that it was you. It has completely transformed the way that guests check in at a Walt Disney World resort. Now, when you're arriving, day of arrival, you get a text message or an email saying, welcome. We look forward to seeing you. Here's your room number. When you arrive, you don't go to the front desk. These massive front desks they have at these resorts are practically empty because they're there for customer service purposes. You have a problem, you can go and talk to them. Otherwise, you go to your room, just tap your wrist to the door, and it unlocks. And that persists throughout all of what they've done. They've actually had some ancillary benefits as a result of this, because inside every one of those magic bands is a little transmitter. So they know where you are in their park. I know it's scary when I say that, right? But they know where you are in the park at any point in time. And they're able to use big data and data analytics to say, are there certain times of day where there are more guests in this part of the park than others? And can we put a special character somewhere else that might lure people away to alleviate congestion? It's the way you check in for certain rides where you have magic or a fast pass, right? They've got all of this information about your behaviors and about where people are and how they move through the park, that they can design better parks and they can do things to make your experience that much more, all right, I don't work for Disney, magical, but we'll say that, right? So it has completely changed how they do this, and it's starting to be considered for rollout at other parks in their international portfolio. But it's something that has completely transformed how they've done certain parts of their business. And if you haven't used it yet, strongly recommend it. Again, not a paid endorsement. There's a lot up here, but I just want to kind of hit on these kind of 4 points here. Well, what are organizations most interested in as it relates to digital transformation? Well, first is really enabling, we're kind of going from a strategy down to a more tactical level, right? But organizations are really interested in learning, how do I create a culture of innovation that can identify opportunities to say, look, we want to improve how we do this process. We want to change it. We want to make it better and different. What do we do? How do we put things in place to make sure we're encouraging that identification and not stepping back and saying, well, we can't do that because that's too hard or it's too much of an investment. Secondly, obviously, with the introduction of a digital transformation initiative, you're going to introduce new technologies and you're going to have to evaluate what tools are going to be best suited for meeting your needs. This is stuff we're used to in the IT profession all the time. It's about keeping up on trends and saying, all right, what do I need to do? Will this fit our customers' needs, right? And we're seeing a lot around AI and robotics and machine learning, blockchain. For those of you in financial services, the fintech and reg tech space, cloud migrations continue to be a focus. Right? All of these things are things as an IT professional you need to be able to understand and speak to, so that you're able to give insights to your business partners on, will this fit? Is this something you should be exploring from a technical perspective? As internal audit professionals, you need to understand what these are and what risks they could pose to your organization. So staying on top of that and understanding what these new and emerging technologies are will enable you to be more effective in either evaluating the effects of a digital transformation or pursuing that digital transformation as well. I swear by the end I'll be able to say digital transformation without stammering on it. So, and then the last three areas are, or last two areas, digitalization, governance, and execution. This is your project management. It's the things that we do every day within IT. It's making sure that you're delivering things on time, on budget, managing security, privacy. Just because you're going through that digital transformation doesn't mean that you don't also have the obligation to make sure that you're still delivering all the same services that the business has expected of you all along. And then finally, personally, I think this is the most interesting, because not only do you play a role in IT and in internal audit in helping in the digital transformation, but you're also areas where you're ripe for transformation yourself. We'll talk a little bit later about how internal audit can be transformed through a digital transformation effort. But IT, this could be implementing artificial intelligence to monitor your vulnerabilities and give you a real-time reaction and risk assessment on, do I need to address this vulnerability right now, or can I ignore it, things like that. It could even be as simple as transforming your user access management practices and using more automation, more analysis and artificial intelligence to say, what access do these people need? Do I need to go get an extra approval for this? Is this something within the bounds of what I expect of this user as well? So there's a lot of things that organizations are asking about already. And if your organization hasn't been, I'd suggest starting probably down here on number 4 first, talking about how you might, what would a transformation effort look like in your sphere of influence? And then as you get your executives on board, which I don't think is going to be hard, then you're going to routinely see executives, CEOs and down, saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to take advantage of digital transformation to benefit our organization? Are there any questions on this or anything we've talked about so far? All right. So let's talk about risks, right? Whether you're looking at it from an internal audit perspective or you're looking at it from a security perspective, there's risks that you need to be able to consider. So I've got 3 slides here I want to cover. The first is going to talk about emerging risks, things that we're starting to see and organizations need to start thinking about. Talk a little bit about IT risks as well as operational risks. And I'll warn you right now, the operational risk slide will show 1/3. I only have 1 slide, it's not 3. I realized that this morning. So let's talk about emerging risk areas, right? We've talked about digital culture in terms of fostering that within your organizations. But there's already an emerging digital culture out there today, right? A lot of the, I'm going to use the M word, millennials. A lot of millennials are already well versed in the use of technology, and they're looking for, on their own, for ways to better their experience by maybe not thinking of it as digital transformation, but they're already thinking about what can I do differently. And again, you need to stay ahead of them. You need to stay, attentive to what their concerns are and what their needs are. But you need to make sure you're pointing them in the right direction so that you're doing it through a controlled and effective process. Digital disruption. I'll talk a little bit about Uber later. We're all familiar with Uber and the sort of digital disruption that they've had. But it's important that we as organizations start thinking about, could our services be disrupted by the use of technology or something that may have taken you 20 years to build, or your organization 20 years or longer to build, that now somebody can deliver in a matter of minutes because they have a built-in business model that can be evaluated. I'll be honest, I don't remember why connecting was in here. It is important. It's, as you go down a digital transformation effort, the more that you transform, the more reliant you are with people's ability to be able to connect to the technology that you're servicing. So your organization's ability or your customer's ability to connect to the internet, connect to you, is going to increase, right? You're going to need and you're going to rely upon that consistent and effective technology access is available for everyone. Broadening data governance. If any of you do business out in the European Union, you're experiencing the broadening of data governance with the GDPR regulations. Right? It's going to continue as more and more data gets collected, as more and more data gets consumed and analyzed. Consumers are going to want greater control and greater insight into how that data is being utilized and stored and protected. So we'll continue to see that. We'll continue to see greater focus on that over time. Evolving technology trends. We talked about some of them in the last slide around artificial intelligence and data analytics and things like that. There's going to be more. There's going to be things that we haven't even considered yet that you've got to stay on top of. And you don't want to be reacting to that every time some new piece of technology gets introduced. So how do you stay on top of it? How do you educate the business so that you're not just reacting every time the CEO reads an article about some new piece of technology that would potentially improve how you do business. And then finally, the globalization of IT. IT services are accessible by so many people across so many geographic regions now. and how you, and this kind of goes to GDPR as well, right? But how do you protect that information in a way that's consistent with how you need to protect it from a US perspective, from a EU perspective, and different regulations over in the Asia Pacific region? How do you stay on top of that? How do you make sure that you're complying with those requirements while also taking advantage of the ability to outsource, co-source, to move IT functions to areas where it is cheaper and easier to provide some degree of support? So this is just a sampling of areas that you should look at from an emerging risk perspective. I would then add to that, from an IT perspective, all the same things that you're used to dealing with from an IT perspective and an IT risk perspective, you still need to do. In fact, you need to get even better at doing it, because now you've got more data, more insights, more information. How do you protect that? How do you secure that? How do you prevent fraud in those areas? How do you retain the information that you need to, and only the information you need to comply with regulatory requirements? You know, and more often, with the deployment of the cloud as part of the digital transformation strategy, you're bringing third parties in, and those third parties are hosting your data, they're securing your data. Sometimes fourth parties are involved in that process. How are you evaluating that risk and making sure that they're going to be around for the length of time that you expect them to be around to get the benefits of your digital transformation initiative? How do you make sure that they're addressing all of these same IT risks through here? Has anyone, or if your organization's doing a digital transformation initiative, has anybody changed your approach to any of these because of the transformation initiative? It's not even after lunch, and it's because the windows are all closed, right? I can't see outside. All right, so some operational risks. I'm not going to drain the slide here, but again, what we're seeing is, we mentioned earlier the changing market dynamics, right? Competitors emerging from unexpected places, right? Uber, again, is a great example of that. Nobody thought that disruption was actually going to occur. So how do I pull from that? I think as digital transformation initiatives take place, we're going to see things like how Amazon measures their margins. They're looking at those razor-thin margins that they get a benefit for because they've been able to transform their organization in a way that hasn't been expected in the past. How many of your IT organizations are dealing with talent mismatches? Not having the right people with the right skill sets to be able to, nobody wants to admit it. I see that. I'm going to say, I think every client I talk to complains about that, right? But I need to make sure you have the right people with the right skill sets to not only support what you have already, but to be able to support what you are implementing. And are you going to have kind of double the resources when it's all said and done? It all needs to be considered and thought through. And this was relentlessly evolving business models. I really just like that because it says relentlessly. But as digital transformation occurs, digital moves at a much faster pace, so will the business models that need to be implemented to be able to gain that benefit over time. So again, things that you should be thinking about if you're managing or involved in a transformation initiative, but from an audit perspective, these are things you should be considering as well when you're evaluating the IT function. I thought I'd provide some perspective too here on what we're seeing in terms of maturity by industry. So not unexpectedly, high technology, the website there, the digital platforms and everything are very much on the front edge of these digital transformation initiatives. Financial services and retail are also very much leaders in this space. For those of you that are in manufacturing, industrial products, and pharmaceuticals and healthcare, not quite getting there. I would say healthcare more from a delivery side is starting to get at higher levels of maturity here, but because of regulations, it takes a little bit longer, takes a little bit more effort to do that analysis. But out of curiosity, does anybody disagree with this chart based on your own experience? I always like to get that perspective. Okay, good. I like it when we have the right answer here. So, great. So we talked about disruption through unexpected avenues, and we're all familiar with Uber. And I really like the statistics that come out of this. I think it really shows you the power of the digital transformation initiative, right? And there, in this case, the transformation was the founding and deployment of their services, right? The founding of their company and deployment of their services. But they were able to basically cut in half the San Francisco yellow cab industry's profits within a year, because they use digital technology to connect people who are providing rides to those who needed rides, right? And interestingly, they also were able to grow that market cap, right? The services that were able to be provided by over 100% in that same year, right? And now we're seeing them driving around through downtown in their self-driving cars. Anybody here from Uber? Okay, good. And they have, they're starting to push out and disrupt even more, and they will continue to do that with their self-driving initiatives, and a lot of their competitors getting in the same place to say, let's cut the people out of the process so that we have a consistent cost structure that we can operate on. So what lies ahead for digital, I will get it right, digitalization. Again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Excuse me. CEOs are going to continue to ask, executive management is going to ask, how do we transform ourselves to take advantage of digital technologies? We're going to continue to see big data analytics be a foundational element for any sort of digitalization initiative, right? Let's use the data we already have to get better insights to answer how we can better serve our customers. Because ultimately, it's the customers that are really driving this digitalization initiative. I think we'll continue to see artificial intelligence as a significant push in this, right? How do you get to the point where you don't have to have people looking at everything, that you can leverage artificial intelligence and other machine learning to say, yeah, this seems right. I can go ahead and auto-approve this particular expense on an expense report because it seems to fit within our criteria, flag certain things that maybe don't for further review. And then finally, Internet of Things. More and more, we have internet-connected devices in our homes, in our cars. I have a thing. Has anybody ever heard of Automatic? Little product plug here. Automatic is a little thing. It's a dongle that plugs into your diagnostic port on your car. And it gives you real-time readouts on where is your car physically, how fast are you driving. They'll leave that information very quickly. How many miles have you driven? I use it. It's great for doing expense reports for work because I just pull it up and I can say exactly how many miles I've driven. It tells you where you parked your car. It'll even send an alert if it detects that you're in an accident. But that sort of thing is more and more. Now we're seeing insurance companies wanting to deploy those same sorts of dongles and give you a credit on your insurance because you're a good driver, and they can demonstrate that, not just because you told them you're a good driver, but because they actually have all of that data that they can pull from. So as your organization works through thinking about digital transformation, start thinking about these three things. These are the areas we're going to see, I think, most growth and the most innovation in the near term. So, what about how many internal auditors do we have here in the room? Okay. So what should you guys care about? Well, so we always take this view of oversight, insight, and foresight here. So what I've tried to do is give you kind of questions to ask about oversight of the processes that are being transformed, how you can be involved in the present activities here, and then what is your role in helping to define that future state, or at least provide insight to the organization on what your future state might be. So things like, how are we in fact modifying this process? Is it aligned with what other organizations or best practices might ask for? Understand though that sometimes the best practices don't keep up with the speed of the transformation. So how can I creatively evaluate this to make sure I'm meeting the spirit without necessarily meeting the words of the best practice? From a present state, It's really just making sure that those newly transformed digital processes are following all the same controls that were expected at the inception of the process. And then finally, from a future state perspective, is this even going to be able to scale to future growth of the organization? Can I continue to do this, or do I not have the right processing power? Do I not have the right understanding of this? Do we have the right people in place to scale this technology as it grows? And are there any other future plans that need to be considered in your audit plan to make sure that you're addressing that going forward? So these are some areas we're starting to see greater focus on, particularly with, obviously, cybersecurity continues to be a focus regardless. But when organizations are going through that digital transformation effort, we see a lot more effort around cybersecurity audits, around data governance because of use of cloud and because of the global nature of technology. Certainly with digitalization oftentimes comes that mobile technology that we talked about earlier. How are you assessing that mobile technology that's collecting a lot of the data? Maybe it's not stored locally, but how are we measuring it? How are we evaluating that going forward? And then the current systems, you got to stay on top of all of those, and you got to make sure you really understand your vendors. Are they prepared for a future digital transformation effort that you might have, as well as what are they doing now to meet your needs and protect the information that are critical to your ongoing digital transformation efforts. I'll also add, I said earlier, internal audit is an area that's also ripe for transformation itself. So these are three very high-level areas that we've continued to see the audit process being transformed through digital technology, right? Audit data analytics. Can I plan my audits differently or focus them differently because I have access to data that I didn't have access to in the past? Can I use data analytics and big data to look for where is the risk? Am I just looking at the risk I think I know about, or am I looking at the risk that the data is actually telling me is significant to the organization? So we're seeing audit teams starting to work down that path. It's tough because you need access to the data to do it, so you really have to partner with the IT professionals to make sure you get the right access and the right information. And don't make them mad at the same time because you're also auditing them on another role. From a big data perspective, are you looking at everything to identify ways, are there behaviors that you're seeing that might be indicative of, maybe we need to do a more in-depth audit of this process because of this data that we hadn't seen before. Some indicators of fraud or other actions that could only be identified because you're looking at that data. And then we've been talking about for years this idea of continuous auditing, but again, through the use of digital systems, you can do that. You can focus more on, all right, I know where things are getting approved automatically or that they're being approved by the system. Let me just see those outliers, those weird things I didn't expect to see. What are they? How do I know about them? How do I then focus my audit on those activities? So, at the end of the day, what should you focus on? And I apologize, these are very audit-centric, but I think they're still very relevant to IT professionals as well. So I'll be taking out the internal audit, just saying your organization, but I think it's still relevant as you work through. So first and foremost, do your current plans audit or technology? Are you considering digitalization? Ask yourselves, does IT leadership really understand what impacts to controls and just basic operation of your IT processes? What impact will that have on your digitalization efforts? Does internal audit really understand what it means to go through a digital transformation or digitalization, right? If you guys don't know what it is, how are you going to help partner with the business to work through that process? And do you have the right skills and the right knowledge set to be able to identify and evaluate whether or not the controls are mitigating the associated risks? And finally, do you have an understanding, does the organization really understand what impacts, what risks and emerging risks are prevalent because of organizations working through this digital transformation effort. Think about it as, from a chief audit executive perspective, from a CIO perspective, how can you drive a digital initiative? Maybe the organization itself isn't going through digital transformation right now, but can you do something? Can you do something in internal audit? Can you do something in IT to further this idea and show the benefit that that a transformation effort might have on the organization? You have to foster this collaborative leadership, right? Digital transformation isn't IT saying, we're going to implement this cool new system, here you go. It's got to be a partnership with the business, and you have to collaborate on it, because as we all know, if the business doesn't adopt the technology that you're about to implement, you've wasted a lot of time and money and gotten minimal benefits. So you have to work together on it. From an audit perspective, you really do need to be involved early on in the transformation effort so that you're upfront, that everybody knows what's going on, that you can help proactively identify issues and make this process run as smoothly as possible. Last thing you want to have happen is you step back and you say, well, we'll audit it once you're done. And you miss those opportunities to say, well, what about this? Have you thought about this risk that might occur? How are you addressing this in this new approach? And now you've got to go back and transform that process again to address those risks. Obviously, make sure you promote a culture of innovation within your own teams and across the organization, and act as that digital change agent, right? To push and say, what are we going to do? How can we improve? What's going to be different because we have access to this digital technology? So, two things I want to make sure you take away with you as you go back to your offices tomorrow. One is, make sure you integrate an awareness and recognition of digital threats into every audit and into every project. If you're not thinking about them proactively, you're going to have to react. You're going to have to, go through the effort again of changing the process. Be active in that. Make sure that your teams in IT and your teams in audit are aware of what those digital threats are and are considering them and integrating them into your audit plan or your implementation plan. And then finally, make sure that you're providing assurance over the organizational threats posed by digitalization. This is both an audit role of evaluating, are we really providing that, not insight, but are we helping to identify those organizational threats? But also, as your teams go through that digital transformation effort, are they asking the question, what is the impact to my organization? Are we going through organizational change management to make sure that everyone is on board and understands what the impacts to the team are, and have a chance to share those thoughts and vet those thoughts with the group. So with that, this is the shameless plug. Please feel free to stop by our booth. We have a bunch of materials related, expand on a lot of the areas that we're seeing as emerging threats and emerging risk areas. We encourage you to stop and pick that up, read a little bit more, some light reading. You can always visit Protiviti.com/digital-transformation for more information on what we're seeing in this area, some insights into our maturity model that you can use to help evaluate your organization's readiness, and certainly follow us on Twitter and continue the conversation. So with that, I think I have like 5 minutes left. Are there any questions from the group here? You realize lunch is not next, right? So you have another presenter. Well, thank you all for your time today. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Please stop by. Appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everyone.